Good evening. It's Tuesday, March 5th, 2024. This is our regularly scheduled meeting of the Newburgh School Board. I welcome the community that's here live. I welcome the community that's watching on a video stream. And we will begin the night with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Howard.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A moment of reflection for those who may be going through something right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Okay, if we can call the roll.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Present.
Mr. Doré?
Present.
Mr. Grant?
Present.
Mr. Harvey?
Present.
Mr. Howard?
Present.
Mr. Levenstein?
Here.
Ms. Mineo?
Here.
Ms. Politi?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
All right, public comment on agenda items. We have one person signed up this evening. I believe Irene Hughes, if I'm saying it correctly.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Irene Hughes. I'm a business professor at Dutchess Community College, but I am also a parent of a high school junior at NFA Maine. I'm a taxpayer, and I am a proud NFA alumni. I recently sent an email to our superintendent that unfortunately went unacknowledged, so I guess that's why I'm here now. I'm here tonight because I am dismayed by the abysmal test results coming out of this district. I know there's been discussion about state testing for primary students, but I'm specifically here to talk about the Regents exams. It's also concerning to me that I heard about these scores because I happened to see a press release that came from Syracuse touting the success of Western New York schools, and that led me to checking out what our schools were doing. I receive a lot of phone calls from this district, often 2 times a day, about a great many things, but I kind of feel like a statement about the dismay over these results might have been one of those calls, maybe even an active pledge to make improvements. To be fair, as a college professor, I am not actually a supporter of high-stakes cumulative final exams. I believe that there should be standardized testing, but to ensure learning, certainly, but that a 2-hour all-or-nothing test is not necessarily the best way to show what our students have learned. That being said, Regents exams are the measures used throughout New York State, so that's the measure I have to compare. If math results for Newburgh were barely passing or somewhat average, I'd perhaps cough this up to other circumstances, but proficiency of only 28% on last year's geometry Regents has no acceptable excuse. With 490 students tested, that's only 137 students who demonstrated proficiency in geometry in Newburgh. For the geometry exam in Newburgh, we were ranked 576 out of 608 in New York State. While I believe these numbers get no justification or excuse, I recognize that our district faces challenges unique to our demographics. So to be fair, I think it's reasonable to compare ourselves to Middletown Central School District. And for reference, Middletown outperformed Newburgh by 15%. Middletown was ranked 518 with a 43% proficiency rate. Not great either, but better than 28. It's not just geometry. In ELA, we were ranked 602 out of 625. I could give you Middletown's results, but for the sake of time, I won't. Algebra 1 Regents, we were ranked 593 out of 599. Algebra 2 Regents, we were ranked 566 out of 594 with a 38% proficiency. This is a trend, and it's setting our students up for failure. Equally concerning is the grade inflation that woefully overrepresents student comprehension all year, particularly in the honors classes. Students earning hundreds and high 90s for grades all academic year are not coming close to matching those scores on Regents. Why is that? I understand that closing the achievement gap is a board goal for tonight's agenda. Back when my son was taking Algebra 1, parents in a meeting were told to secure tutors at great personal cost if they wanted their students to succeed. I was shocked, as you might imagine. $50 to $70 per hour is the going rate for a tutor. Most of our families can't afford that. The school day at NFA ends for students at 2:18, and faculty obligation ends at 2:20. So I guess there's no after-school help for students, and even if there was, there's no late bus to transport them. It's a story for another day. This doesn't bode well for excellence, equity, or inclusion. I said I'm a proud alumni, and I mean it, but in recent years, I find myself having to defend the education that I received in Newburgh because of the output now. My husband asked me if I was coming here tonight just to pick a fight or if there was a salient reason for me to expand my already long workday. Obviously, I care about my son's education, but it's deeper than that. Our students deserve a proper education and a foundation of success as they pursue college, trade schools, and career. This district is failing our students, and it's a collective failure. I've heard the excuse of Common Core and teaching to the test and funding, and the fact that for a very long time, this board couldn't stop infighting long enough to focus on what really matters. Newburgh needs to do better, and I hope that you can find a way to fix this.
Thank you. Does anybody else have agenda items they'd like to speak on? What?
Good evening. My name is Jamie Sheehan, and I'm a parent of students in the district, both at NFA Main and also Temple Hill Academy. I'm here this evening because I sent a letter to the superintendent's office last week that went unanswered, and so I'm here for you to hear it today. These are the words that I sent. I write to you today to express my growing concerns for the safety and education of the students at Temple Hill Academy. We have been part of the Temple Hill family for 10 years, as both of my children started there as kindergartners. I'm an involved parent. I have regularly attended parent-teacher conferences, open house, CSE, 504 meetings, math and reading night, moving up ceremonies, and numerous other events over the course of the past 10 years. I am proud that my family is part of Temple Hill community and of the relationships that we have built with faculty and staff along the way. We have had a wonderful experience up until recently. Temple Hill has gone without an effective principal in that building for over a year, and that is a disgrace. In November, I reached out via email to the interim principal to share concerns regarding safety. I've included that email for reference. I met with the interim principal on 12/13 to discuss these concerns. An assistant principal was also present during the course of that meeting. During the meeting, I was told that I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes that necessitated all of the changes that were being made. As such an involved parent, it was belittling to be told that I didn't know what was going on with the education of my children. Although the meeting left me dissatisfied, I felt it only fair to give the interim time to reflect and respond to the concerns I presented. I fear that my concerns have fallen on deaf ears. The past 2 months have only led to more unnecessary changes and turmoil. The interim has changed the schedule, and now there is no special education teacher in my daughter's ICT class. Although she is a general education student in that setting, those services are not being provided to the other half of her class, and that most certainly will have an impact on her education. Unacceptable. And it's unacceptable that those children are not receiving the services that they are mandated to have. My daughter brings home fights regularly, news of fights regularly. Her instructional time is often interrupted due to these incidents. Most recently received notification of a student vaping during class. I implore you to please address these issues and to select an appropriate and competent leader at Temple Hill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We will now move on to public comment on non-agenda items. Would anybody like to speak on non-agenda items? Got an open mic there. Okay. No executive session, right? Executive session is next. We have no reason to recess into executive session this evening, so we will move on to Section 5. Superintendent, Dr. Manning Campbell.
Thank you. I know that I missed last week's meeting because I was out of the district, but I want to say that I had an opportunity to see much of the meeting, and I thank you for everything that you said, Mr. DeRay, and I'm looking forward to the collective collaboration of this united team, so thank you. Tonight, I would like to take a moment to recognize the committed members of our Board of Education. The members that make up our Board of Education are individuals who ran for public office to represent our community. Although they are unpaid, they commit themselves to learn and evaluate information very quickly, dedicating more time than many even realize. This is a thankless job. The ultimate reward is the positive impact your decisions will have on our children who are in our schools right now, with some decisions potentially positively resonating in our community for generations to come. Some of our current board members voted to approve the inception of the NFA P-TECH and NFA West programs, as well as building a state-of-the-art career and technical educational center. Those decisions will have life-changing impacts on our community. There is a potential for smaller decisions in the future for our newer board members to decide on as well. I would like to personally thank you for not giving up on our children. I am honored to work alongside you, and I am thankful for your unwavering dedication toward providing a quality education to every goalback every day. In front of you, there is a pin celebrating you as a member of our Board of Education and a T-shirt unifying us as individuals working toward the same collective goal. Thank you. Next, I would like to provide a few updates and reminders. At our last meeting, 2 members of our community spoke about concerns they had about missing flags at one of our schools. Our Department of Facilities and Maintenance had new roping and clasps, along with new flags on hand, but needed some help from our community. With the assistance of the New York Tree Masters in Cornwall and their donation of time, expertise, and lift equipment, the district was able to make the necessary repairs, and the American flags are flying at our main campus once again. Thank you to our community members who escalated our awareness of the issue. Thank you to our neighbors who generously assisted our team. Thank you to our professionals who coordinated these efforts and resolved the issue at hand. The superintendent's essay contest is underway. We invite students of all ages to engage in this meaningful display of literacy skills and expression. The prompts and submission details can be found on our district website. I look forward to reading about impressionable women through the eyes of our scholars. Congratulations to our athletes who engaged in state competitions for winter sports. This season, we celebrate 28 athletes from 6 teams as they compete against the top athletes across our state. I would also like to congratulate the 115 students recognized as scholar athletes, earning an average of 90 or above for the second quarter. That deserves a round of applause. Thank you to our coaches and to our families who supported these students both in the classroom and on their respective playing fields. Last week, several schools hosted Black History Month celebrations with students educating their peers about historical facts and inspiring messages throughout our district. Fellows in our My Brother's Keeper program traveled to Albany, and each student gave impromptu speeches in front of their peers from other schools across New York State. Our fellows represented Newburgh Free Academy and our enlarged community professionally and thoughtfully in front of a diverse audience of statewide stakeholders. I'm honored to say that I happened to be in the room. I went and surprised them. Mr. Howard was there, and it was so amazing to see our students representing our community. They did an outstanding job. At the end of the month, we will be sending several middle school students to compete in the regional spelling bee. We are happy this initiative has returned to our district to allow our scholars to compete in academic pursuits. This week is School Social Work Week. Our scholars rely on the support they receive from our school social workers every day. I recognize the work they do and their dedication to supporting our scholars to allow them to learn and grow as individuals in our school community. This week is also National School Breakfast Week. Our school meals heroes serve a nutritious breakfast to every student as they arrive each morning. Not only does this provide a delicious breakfast, but this program also facilitates positive interactions between students and the adults who welcome them to school each morning. March is Music in Our Schools Month. Music education is an important part of our curriculum and allows students to express themselves while learning the foundations of music and and how music relates to their core courses. Aside from classes, students also have opportunities to join performance groups to showcase their talents. At the end of the month, our All-District Music Festival will celebrate the many musical performances throughout our district. I would also like to share a friendly reminder to purchase tickets for the upcoming spring musical Hairspray at NFA, highlighting the culminating talents of all of our students, and a reminder to support the upcoming productions at our individual schools as well. Finally, there are several events scheduled that welcome our families to learn and lend their voices to our community. The next Superintendent's Council will be held on Tuesday, March 19th, with a focus on safety. Our next Parent Connect meeting will be held tomorrow, Wednesday, March 6th, with a focus on resources and supports for success of New York State assessments. All families with students in grades 3 through 5 are welcome to attend. As a reminder, all of our events can be found on the calendar featured on our district website. Thank you. Items 5.3 and 5.4, 2023-2024 School Accountability Status will be presented by Mr. Forget, our Deputy Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Dr. Campbell, board members, and senior staff. At this time, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. David Brown. For those of you that don't know, David Brown is a behind-the-scenes administrator who does quite a bit of the work with regards to our accountability system. He crunches the numbers. He creates templates for our principals to use in very easy formats. And you're going to have an opportunity to hear from him the presentation of the current 23-24 accountability status, and then I'll describe for you the next steps.
Good evening, everybody. So here we are, accountability 23-24, and these are based on the 22-23 assessments and regents from last year. So Jim, next slide. And the next slide. So there are 4 categories of school or of levels. The LSI, local support and improvement, they used to call this good standing. The state is getting away from that kind of language because there's not good standing and bad standing. Okay? Everybody needs support. Everybody needs improvement. So the LSI schools are meeting all expectations and getting the support and the improvement from the district as needed. The next category, targeted support and improvement. These are the schools newly, or their first step into the accountability system. If you've been a TSI for more than a few years, the next level is a TSI, so it's additional support. And the final category is CSI, that's the comprehensive support and improvement. These are the schools that need the most help meeting their finding their barriers, meeting their challenges. They also get to work with a state liaison for assistance. Next slide. So because we have schools in the accountability system, we are a targeted district. So that is the district's designation. Along with that, or because of that, the district writes a district comprehensive improvement plan, and we are provided with federal funds in order to implement that. Next slide. So the indicators. 4 of the indicators are the same regardless of elementary, middle, or high school. There's a weighted achievement and the core subject performance. Those are the 3 to 8 assessments, the ELA, the math, and on the high school level, that would be the regents. English language proficiency, that's for our English language learners. That's based on the NICET slots. Chronic absenteeism, and of course for the high school, it's the graduation rate. Next slide. So if you're a math person, this is your slide. My favorite subject to teach was social studies, but that's beyond. Okay, so the two academically heavy indicators, the weighted achievement and the core subject performance. So for the elementary and middle, this would be your ELA, your math, your science. For the high school, it would be those three and social studies. They're calculated a little bit differently. The core subject performance, the second one, that's just your flat out progress or your levels on the tests divided by the number of students with valid test scores. The weighted average gives us a little wiggle room. It's the same assessments calculated the same way for the numerator. It's divided by either the number of valid test scores or 95% participation rate, whichever is higher. Okay? So when we are encouraging our families and students to take the tests, the higher the participation rate, the better. Next slide. So this is the high school. Theirs is the same. I think I said this before. Social studies is added into that as well. Next slide. So English language proficiency, our English language learners, again, based on the NYSET slots. This is calculated a little bit differently. It's not ranked statewide. This is a straight, how are the students moving between the 5 different performance levels? And then it becomes a success ratio. Next slide. And chronic absenteeism. So students that are missing 10% or more attendance-wise, it becomes chronic absenteeism. It's grades 1 to 12. Kindergarten is not included in that. And excused or unexcused absences, it doesn't matter. If they're absent from school, it can count towards the chronic absenteeism. Next slide. So for the high school, the graduation rates, and they go by, they use the 3 different cohorts, the 4-year, the 5-year, and the 6-year. Next slide. And what they do is they average these 3 together. Okay, it's unweighted. So students that get either a Regents diploma or a local diploma or a CDOS, that all goes into the graduation rate. We really need to keep our eyes on the students that drop out, because that can definitely hurt us. Next slide. So the status of the district. So this is where we are right now. We have 7 schools that are considered LSI. Okay? So these are the schools that are meeting the expectation. They are making good progress. I would like to highlight, and I did not realize that they were going to be here, one of our success stories. And I haven't even gotten to the good part yet. So Vales Gate continues to be LSI. The progress that they made last year to get off the list, okay, their indicators are even better this year than they were the year that they got off the test. So they are an amazing team, amazing school. They are exemplary. So the schools that are on the accountability list. So South Middle School is our one CSI. Okay? They are continuing to find their barriers, or address their challenges. They are really looking into best practices and trying to, spread the wealth on that. What this chart doesn't show is the improvements that are being made. So there are improvements in the different subgroups. It just slow and steady. But one of the things that this doesn't show, excuse me, they have one of the best chronic absenteeism rates in the district. It wasn't always like that, but the past few years, whatever they're doing, their kids are in school. Next up would be the ATSI. So we have GAMS, we have Bonville, still addressing the needs of their multiracial and their black students. A success story here also, though. Last year, Gidney Avenue was a CSI school. They made enough progress to bump up a level to the ATSI. So there's some good work being done there. And finally, 2 TSI schools, and these are 2 schools new to the accountability system this year, Horizons and NFA, all campuses. So they are beginning the process of their needs assessment, starting to look at barriers for their students with disabilities, their black students, they're economically disadvantaged. You will notice in the column for NFA, they're cited for students with disabilities, so for TSI, but you'll also see LSI, PTSI. So they're in good standing in those subgroups, but this is their heads up. Those are subgroups that they really need to focus on. You'll also notice there's some pre-TSI in heritage as well. So the administrators, the staffs, are aware that these are areas of concern, and before things go any, let's take a good look at these subgroups. Mr. Forget is now going to talk about next step for the division of the school transformation.
Thank you, David. So when you take a look at this slide, what you want to see is all green. Our goal is over the course of the next 3 years is to transform this slide into everything in green. Green is where we want to be. But in order to do that, some work needs to occur. So, Dr. Campbell and I have had the pleasure of working together for 1.5 years now. And one of the things that we feel very strongly is that we've got to come up with a better system to support and provide guidance to our highest need schools in this school district. Dr. Campbell and I have taken a look at the school improvement plans, and I will be brutally honest with you, like she was brutally honest with me, she wants them fixed. She feels very strongly that they're written and they're written. But are they strong enough to guide us for the improvement that we seek to have occur in the schools? So we are, Jim, can you go to the next slide, please? We're resurrecting something called school transformation. For some of you that have been working with us and participating with us throughout these meetings, you'll remember that the district did a few visits to the Miami-Dade public school system, the Stockton, California school system, the Mansfield, Texas school system, and we did a lot of research on what does school transformation look like, and how do you really start to address what the barriers are that are preventing our students from being successful. Because you see, it's not our kids that aren't successful. There are barriers that are in their way to success. Our goal is to recreate this school transformation office so that we build that bridge and that tunnel to get through those barriers so that these kids have the opportunity to be as successful as the other students who are already performing. This takes quite a bit of work, right? So this isn't just, let's look at data, let's pick a strategy, let's implement it, and let's hope that everything works. It's much more systematic than that. So this particular office, this is actually my passion, the work that I really do love to do. We need to get better at central office at supporting the schools. We're not blaming the schools in any way, shape, or form. We have not provided the dedicated support, the dedicated technical assistance, and the dedicated professional development to help them change and transform. They're trying to run the day-to-day. They're trying to do what's already in front of them. It's our job to go in and support them. When you look at school transformation, we're fortunate to have a curriculum and instruction department. We're fortunate to have a data and a technology department, an exceptional learners department. All of those departments create the core educational program in this school district. School transformation is trying to figure out where do they need supplemental assistance beyond just the core instruction, beyond just the supports for the special education students? Where do we have to close that gap? Where do we have to come up with those additional resources and support those schools to do something different so that they get a different result? That's the work of school transformation. We've done some work with Ulster BOCES and their new district superintendent. And when we were beginning to figure out what do we want to do differently, we thought about how do we do something, and Ms. Mineo is going to be happy to hear this because she's continuing to pound it into me. It's not just about improvement, it's sustainable improvement. It's not just about fixing the problem with a Band-Aid, it's fixing the problem with a solution that's going to stick and be there when we walk out. And in my conversations with Dr. Schenker, we really think that the way to do that is to build a transformational leadership team in that school. How do we build the capacity of the principal and the assistant principals to transform and change the way things are done in the school and embed them in the process that we're going to take them through so that they own it, so that it's their process. It's not somebody coming in to fix for them, it's somebody coming in to fix with them. That's the direction Dr. Campbell and I are planning to move with school transformation. So this year we are going to pilot because what we've learned is just don't go full bore on things. Figure it out slow and steady. Test it to make sure it works. Make sure you get it tight before you expand it to all the different schools. So this year we're going to be working very closely with Newburgh Free Academy and with Horizons on Hudson. The work that we're going to be doing is to take them through how do you identify what's working and what's not working? How do you look at data? How do you identify the gaps? How do you figure out what needs to be shifted? How do you do a small-scale study on instructional change? How do we work together to do all this work? Our goal is to have a very solid, instructionally based school comprehensive education plan by the end of this year that we can prepare to implement in September and guide that faculty and assist those principals and those assistant principals with the change that's necessary. So I don't read slides to you. You'll see all of these different bullets. That kind of is the meat of what I just shared with you. Jim, can you go to the next slide? So this is the pilot I just spoke about. Our goal is that by the end of June, and at Newburgh Free Academy has one comprehensive plan for improvement that we will break into sub-plans for Maine, a sub-plan for North, and a sub-plan for West, all going after the same thing with addressing the individual needs of the faculty, staff, and administration in each of those schools. After that, in September, our plan is to then start to address the currently identified schools, to support the Bonville team, to move forward with ongoing support and technical assistance. And the same thing with Gidney Avenue and the same thing with South Middle School. Mr. Brown and I will be much more involved in the schools, and we will be working with those leadership teams to partner with them to change what's occurring within the schools. There are guidelines that come from the state, and I will be brutally honest with you. We have not done a really great job in doing everything the state has asked us to do in the current TSIs and CSIs, and as a result of that, Dr. Campbell has made this my priority. She's chosen a priority for me, which is what she should be doing as the instructional leader of this district, and she's given me the challenge to get, in 3 years, these schools in good standing. I accept that challenge with the support of the team that we have, and I know we're going to be successful. So thank you for that opportunity, Dr. Campbell. Any questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Bernstein.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown and Mr. Forget. But I just have a question trying to figure out the chart with the schools and their designation. So I'm going to use GAMS as an example. GAMS has 8 subgroups. 6 are good standing. 1 is targeted. 1 subgroup is below subpar. So the whole district, the whole building retains the lowest subgroup designation. Is that what it is? It's not. If you look at GAMS, isn't it an ATSI school? and there's only one subgroup that meets that. Otherwise, every other one is above that, better standing. So you're saying that the designation for a building might be could be a relatively small subgroup or whatever it is, but then building has that designation.
You also have to think about what is the ESSA indicator that each of those subgroups are attached to. So it could be weighted average, it could be core performance, it could be chronic absenteeism. They're all rated based on the ESSA indicator. We would have to dig a little bit further into that. But it's also not just 1 year of progress that takes you off and puts you into good standing. You have to show consecutive growth over a 2-year period. So right now, even though we're focusing on a subgroup, we're still focusing on the whole school. It's not just looking at that one subgroup. That subgroup seems to be having, there seems to be barriers that are preventing that one subgroup from hitting the level that we want it to, but we still have to look at whole school transformation.
So, but it must show that there was greater gains in that building than others. If it's still, it needs a I know it needs a long-term recovery is what you're saying, but that even though 7 of the 8 groups are a better standing than what the building is.
Not all schools have the same number of subgroups. Not all schools have the same number of students in each subgroup. So you can't compare it apples to apples. You have to look at them individually. So I can't answer that particular question, but I do understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
Mr. Bergerelli.
Thank you. Mr. Forget, when looking at the chart that's up there on the board right now and looking at South Middle School, are we looking back to see where these students came from as far as our elementary schools and a history of performance?
So I've been working with the district for many years and for the district for 14 years. And in my entire time within the district, South Middle School has been identified as a school that was in need of some type of assistance or improvement. This is not a new particular situation. I can tell you that South does experience growth. The sustaining of that growth is where we kind of slip back. A greater study needs to be done in South. And there needs to be buy-in from everyone to adopt the improvement efforts and to take responsibility for changing the practice. That's from the custodian all the way up to the principal of that school. Everyone has to understand that we all play a role in this, including the superintendent and the Board of Education, as South is our highest need school. Do we take a look at where the students come from, what schools they come from, elementary, the feeders? Yes, we do. But I can tell you middle school traditionally in this district has been something we really need to assess and create a new model of middle level education. I believe heritage, I'm going to be, again, just honest with you, heritage is a concern for me as well. And I see change and growth more in South right now than I'm seeing in heritage, so we're going to have to start to work with heritage as well.
Thank you.
I also want to add to that point that we noticed that last year, and that was the reason we created a position for a director of middle level education, so we can have a deeper dive to support that transition, because we know that that's where most oftentimes nationwide, not only in this district, we lose students because, you know, the transition from one grade to the next usually causes that decline.
Ms. Manatha?
Thank you. As you know, I'm a real data person. I really dig into this stuff. And thank you for answering a number of my questions. I'm glad that you're going to be doing the pilot to support some of the schools who are potentially in trouble. I really feel that at the middle level, we really need something very solid to move forward. I don't think that hearing about climate and culture is really going to help and be very specific about what needs to be done to move forward in the educational capacities. Specifically for Black students who, there are a number of pinks and yellows across the board in that category, I think there needs to be something done very, very specific to help our students of color to be able to achieve better than the lowest 10%, which is what the next chart that you provided gives us to look at. I also asked and I know you're going to do this in the future, to separate out the NFA campuses, because I think it's incumbent on us to look at whether that large NFA Main has different problems than a smaller NFA North and a smaller NFA West. So I think those things are really important to look at. The last thing that I'd like to say is that I think communication with staff, students, and parents needs to be in a more user-friendly format. This is very difficult to understand, especially for those of us who are or were educators. So I think for parents in our community, our staff and our students, to have everything that you're telling us, which is really important stuff, to be very easily understood, and how all of us as partners can work together to make this work. And I applaud you on what you want to do with your department, because I think it's in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Manel.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Forget. So, as I look at the information, and I understand what we're trying to do, but what does that work look like with one of the biggest factors that we know that's really truly impacting young boys and girls of color and young boys and girls from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, and we are a high-needs district. We understand that those are determining factors that are really impacting our children's ability to come to school ready to learn. Also understanding that early literacy is so important. And when I say early literacy, I'm talking about 0 to 4. And when you factor in economic disadvantage, when you factor in a culture and the systemic things that are going on in high needs areas, what are we going to do to address those issues and those wraparound services that are truly needed for these kids and these young boys and girls to be successful, for them to come to school ready to learn and get across the academy field in 11, 12, 13 years? And that's the real question. What does that work look like?
So one of the things that we're going to be doing is doing a deeper dive into the data to try to figure out specifically what is the data telling us. Because you've got to remember that some of these subgroups, students are counted multiple times within a subgroup. So I could be a Hispanic student, I could be a student with a disability, I could be an English language learner. I fall into those 3 categories. We've got to get more sophisticated in the way we analyze that data to figure out what's preventing those students from being successful. When you mentioned poverty, we already this year started to address instructional strategies with regards to poverty. We've got teachers that went through a training session that are now trained and certified to turnkey some generational poverty training that took place in the fall of this year. But before we can do any of that, Mr. Howard, we've got to go deeper into the data to identify the specific reasons why the students are struggling and why they're not being successful before we apply an intervention to it. And I don't think we've done that great a job over the past couple of years. Things have kind of put us on hold. I agree early literacy is critical, but we've got kids in the middle level that are struggling right now. So adolescent literacy on top of early literacy has to be a priority for us, and that's something that Dr. Freeman Mack is already working on.
Can I follow up? I agree with you 100%, Mr. Forget, in understanding mid-level. But if you start out early elementary with a deficit in literacy, at the middle level, it's going to intensify. So what are we going to do as a district to get that heavy load early? Are we doing anything in that K through 2 area, but bigger than that? And I know it's outside of our scope, but it's not really outside of our scope, because the 0 to 4 will eventually come to us. So what are we doing to impact that area? Because when kids come to us as 4.5, 5-year-olds, not being engaged from an early literacy perspective, they're behind their counterparts and they're sitting in the same classrooms with them. So is there a plan for that 0 to 4?
So I believe Dr. Campbell wants to speak, but I just want to mention, I want you to refer back to what we know is working. Look at Vails Gate STEAM Academy. Look what's happened in Vails Gate STEAM Academy. Look at the students coming out of Vails Gate STEAM Academy right now. Look at the change and transition that's occurring at Gidney Avenue. And you're going to hear from Mr. Glowacki and Ms. Pena very soon. We've got some really good things that are happening, and we have to learn from the good things that are happening in the district and get that spread across the whole district.
I just also want to add that in addition to all the great work that's happening in our schools, one of the things that we're in the process of relaunching is our Newburgh Basics, and that's really about focusing on early literacy. We've partnered with some community partners as well as the hospital, and we're in communication and in planning in terms of how do we roll out, what does early literacy look like, and what that means when the babies leave the hospital, and what type of supports do we give to families as a school district. So those are the types of things that we're working on the district side of it, and perhaps I can do I can glean to, sure. Is it okay for me?
Thank you, Dr. Campbell.
Dr. Freeman-Mac, you're welcome.
So we have several new amazing grants that have come in. So Newburgh Basics, financial literacy, reading on grade level by third grade are those areas of focus. We're also having a writing initiative, and what I mean by that is we're examining our writing. Students really have to read, talk, and read and write. It just really goes back to the science of reading, which we all know is it's not a program, it's a framework. So it's really focusing on those big 6 areas so that we can examine what our students are doing and how best we can support them. And there is a direct relationship between reading across the curriculum. So that's another area where we're looking at as well, where we're ensuring that students are reading in science and math and social studies and all those content areas and supporting it with that focus.
Thank you.
Mr. Grant.
Yes, I noticed that during the breakdown, NFA is just all 3 campuses, and I believe it was stated that it will eventually be broken down into 3. When will that be?
That's going to take a little bit of time. The way Newburgh Free Academy is one school according to the state education department. Even though it's on 3 campuses, it's one school. All the data that we have to report to the state has to be reported as one school. So what we have to do is Ms. Peterson and I need to sit down and create our own reports and extract that data from the system in order to create campus by campus data. It's going to take a little bit of time to do that.
Okay.
But we have local assessment data that can inform what's occurring in each of those campuses that we'll be using to inform the school improvement plans.
Mr. Walker.
Me and technology. I just wanted to make 2 comments. The first is, since I came here, I talked about one book in particular called Countering the Conspiracy Against Black Boys, in which is now in its 35th year of being printed, and it discusses how black boys in this, it all spills over, but black boys in this case, from 1st grade to the 4th grade, seem to be on the same par as their fellow students. And that something happens in the 4th grade, he calls it the 4th grade syndrome, where the scores start to fall, there's less interest in what's going on the part of the kids. And I had asked, is that true for our district? You know, maybe that's one thing maybe there's a spot where it reflects the book. Maybe there isn't a spot. But if it does reflect the book, he has plans. All right? Also, I think a major component of this are the teachers. In another book called White Architects of Black Education, right, they talk about how it sounds like something that took place in 1954, but it's very current, in which they can walk into, researchers have walked into nursery schools, pre-K programs, and when they tell the kids to line up for whatever, the white kids go to the front of the line, the black kids automatically go to the back. Maybe that's something we need to investigate. I was one of those kids who in college went to the back of the class because I was insulted. Maybe there's something there. I don't know.
We will take a look at that. Thank you.
Any other discussion or comments? Thank you, Mr. Forget.
Thank you.
So, there we go. Good evening, Mr. President, Superintendent Manning Campbell, executive team, board members. Tonight we have the privilege to present on our school, Gidney Avenue, and all the great work that's going on. So I have to say I'm a very proud principal. This is my assistant principal, Ms. Pena. We are elated with the progress that we're making, and we are going to continue that work because we are moving right through. So our 4 highlights of our school comprehensive education plan. For commitment 1, we're really committed to increasing the reading level of all of our learners. I'll get to that in the next slide, but we are in having the most students read at a proficient level in the last 7 years. I can't say that enough of the work that's been done by the teachers and the work that's been done with the families to really push forward. We're better where we were than last year, and we're going to keep pushing to keep going where we need to get to. We're really focused on giving student feedback on their math progress. So we want to make sure that teachers are really focusing on giving them a glow or a grow on what they're doing on in math and how they're making progress so the kids can say, oh, you walk into class, I know what I'm working on and what's the next thing. And you can ask the kid. It might not be as articulate as you want, but it's developmentally appropriate of, I'm working on addition, or a 5th grader might be saying, I'm working on citing my facts on how to retell my answer in a word problem. So it's really more about making sure it's student-friendly and that there's quality feedback, not, okay, you got the star, let's keep it moving. So they know what they're learning, because that's really important. Commitment 3, we want to be partners with our families. We want to make sure families are crawling in and out of our building, that we're partnering with them, that there's nothing that they don't feel comfortable coming to us with. We want to be their support. If it's connecting to resources outside the district, we recently, thank you to Buildings and Grounds in the district, we just are putting the finishing touches of getting our washer and dryer installed so we can start helping families who need to do wash or wash the kids' jackets to really make an impact there. Commitment 4, we want to be consistent leaders for the school. Because if we're consistent, then the teachers are consistent, the kids know the expectations, the adults know the expectations, and that is the roadmap of how we move forward. And we learned a lot from Vales Gate, where they stuck to the same similar strategies over a long period of time to be in that. So I pick Syria, and she picks Eileen's brain all the time of what do we do to move forward? And then it was, all right, we're going to the school, how do we move it forward? How do we partner? And it's really gotten in a good direction. So focusing on commitment 1 of increasing reading proficiency, we've done a boatload of strategies. We have professional learning communities that happen daily with each grade level. Our instructional coach is working with the 2 of us to implement that. Focus in on those meetings with the teachers of what is the power goal? What are they working on? What was the last time you met with this student? What strength are they working on? What are the next step? How is it going? Do you need to change anything? And really being tight on instructional practices of reciprocal teaching and explicit instruction. So we're really focusing on that. We're doing consistent walkthroughs. We're really focusing on the data analysis. So to look at the data, but to understand it and then make it actionable is what we really want this year to help come to life, because the better you're planned as a teacher, the better you'll implement. So the benchmarks, we set some very lofty benchmarks as a school leadership team where we want 85% of teachers giving glows and grows to the students and that they know what they are. 35% of students will be performing on or above grade level according to iReady. That's one data point. And I'll show you where you'll see in the next chart where our starting point was to see how many students that actually is moving. 45% of students will be performing in English and Spanish as we have transitional bilingual and we have students who are learning the language. So we're moving through that. And then 85% of lessons will be meeting lesson plan expectations that are set forth by the district. And I will say the teachers really have done a great job of planning. We've done a real big focus. So when we look about how we're meeting our benchmarks, are we getting there? Have we hit all of them or are we close? So if we look at just iReady for ELA beginning of the year, we are at 10% of our students. So that's right around, we have about 600 some odd students, about 60 kids. Right now we're at 23%. And this is one data point online. And then the real thing is that we decrease from 46% of students who are 2 or more grade levels below to 34. That's really difficult to do. And teachers are working together. AIS teachers are working with their grade level teachers, with the E&L teachers, where no one's working in a silo. So everyone is moving together to really do this. When we talk about our reading proficiency, we started with 60 students reading on grade level. Right now, we have 151 students, so the teachers have increased about 90 students to reading at a proficient reading level. And what I'm really most proud of, and I think the building is as well, is that we had 224 students reading at an emergency level. That's 2 more grade levels below to start the school year. We've decreased that to 188. Last year, we got down to about 220 students. So we're showing year-to-year growth of maintaining that progress, which is fantastic because that is changing lives and giving them the skill set to really move forward, to be successful and increase that graduation rate, because it starts at the elementary school of giving them the skills to pass the Regents test and to pass that geometry test that they're struggling with. And as well as our anneal readers, we're making progress. We have a lot of students who are coming in from the country who are learning what school is, and it's very different, but it's also the goals of anneal readers is to become ERLA readers. So as they graduate out, as they become proficient, they hit a certain level, they go into ERLA. So that's why it's a much smaller population. So that group of teachers and E&L teachers are really doing great, and the really proud part is our English language learners on our current SS scorecard are our highest performing subgroup. So they're really moving. Also, in our STEP, we use a lot of qualitative. We want to have survey. We want to get teacher voice, student voice, and family voice. So we surveyed teachers about glows and grows. And as you can see, our teachers, and this is anonymous. We don't know their email. We don't know how they're responding. So it's just being truthful. So we have made progress from the fall to the winter. We've put in some time and really focused in on those PLCs to see that growth, which I'm really happy about. And then our family survey has also increased, so that when we first got the initial of, okay, we really need to make sure we're sending home what a Power Bowl is and communicate with the families of what are the strategies and making sure that we're giving them the books and that they know what to do with their child or how they can ask certain questions and just giving them the tools to be successful with. Student surveys, again, teachers, we need to know if the students, and we try to make the questions student friendly. So some questions are, teachers have read to the students, 5th graders might have done it on their own, but it's just understanding and going through with that. And as we see, we're moving in a real positive direction. In some areas we have to make more focus in on, but also we were reflecting today even of maybe we need to wordsmith some of the questions. Commitment 2, we're focusing on the math progress. So again, we're looking to see 40% of students on or about grade level, 70% of students passing 100% of their differentiated lessons, and a 20% increase from their diagnostic. So if we see, we made a 10% increase, but if we look at our 2 or more grade levels below, we decreased by 20% in that 2 or more. So we're moving students, and it's showing progress. Did we hit that benchmark? No, but we're close, and we're moving in a good direction. Also, for the students, using the instructional arm on iReady, to me, it's the purpose of this is it's differentiated instruction. It's based on how the students are doing the work and how the questions are answering and how they're modeling it for them. And the students, we have a large, almost in all grades, in the 90 percentile of between passing every lesson between 70 and 100%, which is where we want to be. So that's excellent. Again, teacher results, we're moving in a good direction. We still have to be higher. We're right now at 83%, hopefully by the end of the year, on students of they know what a glow and grow is. So we're going to work on that 17% and see, okay, how do we support them and do we need to be more explicit? We've been focusing more on giving stickers of glows and grows and next to student works on rubrics so they have a better understanding of that. Commitment 3 is working on our partnership with families. So we have an implementation of student advisory. The big one this year, this was different than last year, is that at the end of each unit, for 50% of the 4 units that they have at the elementary level, we're inviting parents in to have students present their learning and their work to families. So the parents are invited in, the students make a diorama, they're doing presentations, they're doing speeches, and it's really making the the American Reading Company units that we're using and implementing in the unit in school come to life. And it's having a much greater meaning, and the kids really are loving it. The other thing that we've done the second year in a row is the first 3 days of school, we invite the families to drop their children off at the classroom. So between the first 3 days of school and open house, we're capturing the majority of the families in our school and making connections to know who their teacher is. And that has been a really great thing. It's also helped lead to some of our decrease in chronic absenteeism. Our benchmark is 20%. And right now we're at right around 28%, but that's down from 35% the year before and 43% the year before that. So we're really moving in a nice direction there, and I think we'll hit that goal of 20% this year, which will really light up our ESSA scorecard. For, again, opportunities, we're inviting families. Teachers have planned, most of the culminating units are in the back end of the year because it is a newer thing for the building, so we want to make sure we're doing it properly. And then family, we have doubled the size of our PTO. People are attending. They're communicating. It's really come to a nice spot. And commitment 4. So as leaders, we get to do everything under the sun, right? So we have a constant eye on PD, data analysis, but one of the goals was to increase students by reading level by 60. We're at 90 right now. We want to decrease chronic absenteeism. We're at 28, so we're down from 35. We've touched 20% this school year, so that's why I'm comfortable saying we can get there, because it's a sliding scale as the year goes on. Our out-of-school suspensions we haven't had a 10% decrease, or our disciplinary referrals, but I will say is that there are a lot of one-time offenders where they're learning, and then there's a few students there is some recidivism, but we're working with the families to address that, put counseling in place, restorative practice, so that it really comes more into a learning experience, and then it's it's not a punitive experience. So, but overall, it's really coming into a good spot. Again, teacher surveys, teachers see us that we're visible, we're out, we're helpful, and then we're going from there. And then our next steps, Ms. Pena.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So while we are very proud of the work that we've done, we still have some work to do, and we acknowledge that. So in terms of our next steps, with commitment 1, we're looking to get really deeper into the classroom with our support staff, and we're going to model and support the explicit instruction within the classroom, of course, data-driven based on the data of each class. We will revisit the subgroups based off the ESSA scorecard to provide that equitable services. So basically, we're looking deeper at that data, and we're targeting those students and using our AIS and support staff to differentiate those groups that are being pulled out for that support service. So that is constantly changing, because as the data changes, so does those groups. So that is a constant monitoring of the data and our instructional moves as a building. In terms of commitment 2, where we're looking at the glows and grows, we have been supporting our teachers with the reciprocal teaching in PLC, teaching them how that looks in the classroom. In turn, we're going to continue to model and support with our instructional coach. There is a lot of modeling work being done that support the coaching cycle, and there is a lot of push-in and a lot of meeting with the coach that supports. So she is pushing a lot of that work with the modeling within the classrooms. That is a nice way of being so low level in terms of low risk for teachers, because sometimes teachers are afraid to come to the administrator and say, I need help. So with the instructional coach, it's kind of like private between them. They can talk about goals, set goals, and work on those goals, and then the support comes in a non-evaluative way, which is a great way to move and improve teacher practice. We are also looking to, again, the glows and grows. I know Rob spoke about it. Looking deeper is just not just a glow, but what kind of glow and how specific does that glow help support the students' learning of what am I learning and being reflective of what do I have to improve on next. So really looking at the quality of the glows and grows. In terms of commitment 3, we're going to continue with our open door policy for parents and guardians. We are looking for the parent volunteers, making sure that they're cleared by the district and we're following all protocols, because we do see how that partnership, the parent partnership, is strong. So we are looking to continue our open door policy with our families, continuing with the community celebrations. Rob did forget to mention that not only do the parents get to, but also classmates come in to see the peers work. So they get to walk around and the students present to their peers of different levels, of different grade levels. So it's really nice to see when that communication between the different grades and different peers happens, and also builds the relationship. And the increased attendance to celebratory dance parties and additional incentives. We've implemented a few things in place. We're celebrating. Most recently, teachers post just a sign on the door, say we have 100% attendance today. So if Rob and I are walking down the hall, we make sure to open up the door and say, hey, congratulations. And the children really do feel good about that. So they are happy when they get celebrated. And our last commitment 4, is that consistent leadership, continuing to work very closely with our iReady and ARC liaisons, our support staff, our district support staff, making sure that we're using them strategically and not just, because of compliance. They have to come and do their thing. No, we have to ask questions and be very targeted on what support we need. And we drive that professional development and ask what we want them to provide for us. So that is one of major things in terms of continuing the consistent leadership. Again, continuing with our impact cycle, using the impact cycle, the coaching cycle, with our coaching and supporting our teachers. So we are using the impact cycle framework. And again, just continuing, and the last is our SEL program, which is very, very big. Our SEL program, we use the zones of regulation, making sure we are consistent, that the curriculum is being implemented, because there are lessons that teachers have to do in order for the program to be successful, to create that common language. If we're consistent with our SEL program, we have a common language. Student expectations is the same across the board, and that will lead to a decrease in behavioral incidences, and also that support staff, and continuing the restorative circles, and continuing the support group with our social workers and all of our PPS staff. So we do have some work to continue.
And one last thing, I would be amiss to say that none of this could be done without Ms. Pena and without my union delegate, Ms. Claudine Mazza, who is here. We talk to her probably 10 to 12 times a day. It is a true collaboration and partnership of, hey, we want to do this, or what are your thoughts? And it's a real true sounding board, and that's really what has helped move the building forward. So thank you, Claudine. Thank you to the teachers, because it's not possible to just be top down. It's truly hearing everyone, making it a collaborative team effort, and that's where it feels good. It feels like everyone wants to come to work and really are supporting the kids. And yeah, we have work to do, but I'm confident that we as a school can get it done. So one teacher in a PLC the other day said, do you think we'll get to good standing or LSI? And I said, it's not when, it's not if, it's when. So sooner than later, we're going to be there. So thank you.
Mr. Phoenix? Mr. Phoenix, we're south is second.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Manning Campbell. Good evening, board members, executive staff. I want to take this opportunity to introduce, for one, my AP, Mr. Andy Cameron. He's tasked with helping implement our SEP, but also to support teachers instructionally. And we also have 3 other APs who are not here, who have been a tremendous help to our building. We have Mr. Joseph Beckner, Mr. Fernando Gonzalez, and Mrs. Erica Barrios. The administrative staff that we have at South Middle School is a tremendous one, one that is very diverse and has the ability to address all of the needs of our building. I want to say that when Mr. Brown put up the image of the standings of all of the school, you saw a lot of non-green when it came to South. A lot of people will see that as a frightening challenge. A lot of people will run away from it. I see that as an opportunity, one that has a lot of great promise, and we're doing a lot of great things in there right now to change it. But I will say that the change that we've been able to make, the progress that we've been making currently, would not be possible if we did not have the support from our central office administrative team, from the superintendent, down to working with Dr. Freeman Mack, also with Onyx Peterson, and along with our HR staff. It's really been a team effort to help implement the goals and progress that are happening. We're going to go over our plan. We're going to give you a glimpse at what we designed in the beginning, but I'm also going to provide you with information of what's going on as we're moving in motion. You always start out with a plan, but good leaders make the adjustments as you get the real-time data. So as an important piece to what we want to do is we do not want to stick out our goals through a timeline where we break it down into quarters to where, yes, we may have an end goal, but if we see that we're not on that path or something needs adjusting, we're making those changes. We're not going to sacrifice the time and experiences of our students that are sitting in our seats when we know that we can make immediate changes and small adjustments to provide them with the best instruction and experience as possible. So our first commitment, we were committed to providing professional development that is consistent with student needs, with special attention to our students with disabilities and our ENL learners, in order to build a capacity for the school-wide faculty to improve the outcome of all students. We've identified 2 subgroups, but with those 2 subgroups, we're still focused on the whole school. One of the goals is by June of 2024, we will establish data teams with the hope of monitoring the progress of students on a quarterly basis, as I just stated. Focus on the curriculum taught in the self-contained classrooms and make sure that they align with the NACSD curriculum. Provide instructions to our special education co-taught classrooms that will reflect various teaching models for integrated co-teaching, and also support the instruction in our English language learning classrooms that will target and address the data that we receive in order to improve the needs of those students and the practices in there. So some of the things that are going on, as we're moving forward. We've implemented a structure or framework that allows the teachers to analyze data. The history at South is a detailed one. We have teachers who have been there for over 5 years, and we also have a lot of teachers with less than 5 years of experience. So I think that that's a great blend of talent that we have. But what we wanted to implement was sustainable practices that allow teachers to be able to see how effective they are in the classroom with the students and not wait 2-3 months to really take a look at the impact or the adjustments that are needed to happen. So with that, we've implemented a data protocol where we have department meetings that are held weekly and where they have a format to where each week they have a specific task. And the first week will be started on looking at student data. Then the administration will model with each department how we break down the data, how we look at it, and how we plan to be better. We also implemented and used a data template that highlights who our push students are and who our students who are not in the proficient range. That gives the teachers opportunities to create groups, work on building students up to moving them closer to proficiency, and also tracking to see what we're doing to make sure that we stay on the path that we've put out for the end of the year. Along with that, the data team also looks at student attendance and also our behavioral data as well, because they all are related and connected. Along with that, our instruction in the special education co-taught classrooms will be reflective of various co-teaching models. You want to speak to that?
Thank you. Good evening, Board of Ed, Superintendent, Mr. Forget. One individual we need to thank is Mr. David Brown, who's in the audience as well. Although he says he's just a social studies teacher, he certainly has been a big support for myself with math and crunching numbers. So thank you, Mr. Brown. Don't give yourself a little more credit than social studies. So, and hearing Mr. Forget, I'm very humbled and honored because the work that we have in front of us yet is an uphill battle, but it's very rewarding. So we're seeing gains. We're seeing gains right now. As Mr. Phoenix talked about with ICT models, right now we're looking at parallel teaching and also station teaching as a real impact for student achievement. And walking in the classrooms we've done, and we're going to get to some of this data, 118 walkthroughs inside of our building. And literally myself, about 35 walkthroughs in just ICT classes. We've also been able to create templates for common language, but the biggest piece of everything we're talking about is the conversation that happens outside when you see a lesson, when we meet with them, individual teachers. And one of the pieces that we had, RPC, the Regional Partnership Group, is really working with our teachers on best practices and strategies. And myself, one of the pieces we've talked about with our template is looking at our push-pull students from New York State Achievements, ELA and math scores from the previous year, and looking at those students using DataMate and highlighting the students that we can make impact on, with all the students that could benefit from some of the activities, but that's how we're using data inside of our building. Really looking at it and making teachers on a template write down their ID numbers and how they're supporting these students in instructional practices. It's changed the language, it's changed the room, the way the layouts of the rooms have appeared, but it continues. It certainly continues. We've also had a Pineapple Challenge. It's not just ourselves as lead learners inside the building pushing into our classrooms. It's also having an incentive-based program for teachers to go teacher to class. So the first couple months was really just to get them inside each other's classrooms, which they had not done. Now we have it focused to not just instruction, but really focused to group work and checking for understanding. Because we want to make sure that they have those conversations. Hey, how did you group your students? So they follow basically a section model where their classes are following from English to social studies to science to math. So you have teachers with common language and how they're working with those students. So the conversations, the format that Mr. Phoenix put together with their schedule as PD, with data, common planning, and then instructional practices, give them the opportunity to have these conversations. And the Pineapple Challenge, like I said, what that is basically they're peer-to-peer going inside each other's classrooms to work for 5 or 6 minutes. And we're actually talking about it this afternoon with Regional Partnership to have them actually go in with them as well. So again, as a host teacher, you're volunteering and saying, hey, come in my classroom, you sign up ahead of time, and you're telling us, and we look at the list, so we know who's signing up and what we're looking at, and we're having conversations with those teachers as well. I think that was it for this slide. Let me make sure. Mr. Phoenix, want to talk about the next one, lesson plans. And again, we have 2 commitments. The first one is really centered around professional development for teachers and how to improve outcomes for students. The second one's more family-oriented based, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
One of the things that we notice is that
although we know it's going to be a long road, but we can make a lot of quick gains. So one of the things that the administrative staff put together is that we put together flexible scheduling. We know that our teachers need a lot of support. We have a staff committed to the challenge, trying to be better, trying to support each other. So what we implemented with our flexible scheduling is that we put together town hall meetings for our students that happen twice a month, and they happen by grade level. When those students come to the town hall meetings, they are focused on either SEL topics or trends that we see going on in the building, or addressing grade-specific information that are provided by either assistant principals, our PPS team, the guidance counselors, social workers, psychologists. While the students are receiving this information in their town hall meetings, those grade level teachers are now receiving in-house PD that target the specific needs that we see based off of the walkthroughs that we do, the common planning meetings and the team meetings that we attend. So that's how we provide the teachers with extra support to build their skills and to widen their tool bag to provide better instruction to our to our students. We know that in order for us to make the gains that we want to make, we have to continue to support our teachers and our staff by providing them with that professional development so that they can be better and hone their skills more. And that's something that is showing dividends currently. Along with that, we have our untenured teachers who submit their lesson books to their grade level AP so that we can review and have discussions that are designed around instruction. We have department meetings that are held the second week of each month that are centered around scope and sequence, important data or trends that have been discovered with the support of the administration. Another support that we have in the building that is very strong, we have lead teachers. We provide training to the lead teachers so that they can then turnkey that to their grade level colleagues. Our teachers look to their grade level teachers as immediate support along with the administration. So we have to make sure that they're equipped with the tools and the support in order to be effective with what they're doing in the classroom. So we had hoped to see a reduction of at least 49% of the students 49% of the students stated that the choice in the classroom is something that they see and is a reflection of. When we did our surveys, we've surpassed that, and we're actually at 59%. Of course, we would love for that to be greater, but it's an indicator that we are making gains. So once again, we continue to measure what we're doing as we go, and when we see areas that need to be adjusted, we make those as a team and a whole community. We wanted to also provide instruction to our English language learners in the classroom that are the target, identify students in need, and their provision of effective practice. We have a very strong E&L department, language department in our building. We also have a very well-seasoned grade level administrator, Mrs. Barrios, who has over 10 years experience of leading the E&L department. She hails from a lot of years of experience in Middletown, and she has already noticed trends, corrected errors to instruction, to student grouping, and also has provided a ton of support to our E&L staff. Along with that, in order for us to be better at serving and improving that identified group, our subgroup, we've implemented having an E&L lead teacher. Like I said, we have a very strong E&L staff, and in order to support them even more, we have appointed a person who is their lead teacher, something that has not been in the building before. And all of that is leading to, for anyone who ever comes to the building, when you walk into those classrooms, you automatically see that the impact, the experience, the command of the instruction that those teachers have in those rooms. And that's a model that we're trying to replicate through the rest of our departments in the building. This one's slide. All right, I'll say that. So what are we doing to support this work? We have a link tied to it, but I don't think we could get to the link. But we have conferences that are set up after every walkthrough, which is important. Teachers need to hear the good things that they're doing, but they also need some light onto things that they can improve on. We constantly, one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we implemented was that we wanted to have an administrative staff that is an instructional staff. And what does that look like? Our administrators are in the classrooms daily. Yes, we still deal with the day-to-day tasks that, come up, but we make it a point to make sure that we get into the classrooms, we see what's going on, we support the students. If you ever visit the building, when we walk into classrooms, it's not a startling thing to our students or our teachers. Instruction continues without missing a beat, and that's due to the presence that our administrative team is, having on the staff. We're also partnered with the Regional Partnership Group, who are providing support with us to South, state assigned, and they're helping us design professional development, support our teacher practice, and also analyze data and make improvements to our plans. So they're also inside of the as well. And one of the things that we have incorporated as well is that grade team leaders are taking learning walks with them as well. So it also sharpening the lens of our grade team leaders, as well as doing joint walks with the administrative staff with the briefing as well afterwards. Our meetings are set up inside of the school day, and we focus around our sixth grade ARC program and our iReady implementation and data.
So just took some of the links or surveys are actually linked, but we did take a couple pieces of anecdotal and also some information for all of you when we had a recent survey. Teachers, they did feel professional development was helpful. A couple of those sessions, one of them in particular was actually unpacking engagement in Domain 3 and construction and questioning and grouping, making sure they were in groups by department, also breaking them into different departments. So math with science teachers and English teachers and foreign language teachers. When we surveyed students, this was actually very interesting. I did this and had them come out from their cafeteria when they had lunch, and they were very funny about it. They took it so seriously, so they had some questions, and the results are actually, do they feel like what they learn and their opportunity to show what they learn, is it represent to their culture? And they basically 61%, basically 100% said yes, it was, and 27% said somewhat. Okay, but it's a lot of hand-holding because they're asking questions as they're actually taking the survey. And parents, we had a huge number, over 130 responses, and that was taken back when we had parent-teacher conferences in November. And we actually sat with them, and they came in, and we pretty much had thank you to Bill Morgan and Pam and Peterson and the FACE group because they were instrumental in supporting this drive. They're happy with communication inside South Middle School between the teachers and themselves and administration. As you can see, very satisfied with 69% and 29% was somewhat. They did want the question that came up was SEL workshops. They feel like that was something that they could benefit from, and they said it'd be very helpful, about 63%. And academic workshops also very helpful, 60%. We also have on there, and I didn't give you that information, what time of day. I remember we sat down, and the first day when they came in for parent-teacher conferences, the nighttime group had one response that they were looking to have their evening workshops. And then when the day parent-teacher conferences took place, what do you think they wanted? They said during the day. So whether they're working night shift or something else. So what are they, during the day or after school, the cause and the concern, they need help, they need support from us. SEL and also academic to help their children at home. And our next commitment, which is committed to improving relationships between students, faculty, staff, this really has a huge push with FACE, and also Mr. Phoenix done a lot of work. Again, tons of pictures here. With Hispanic Heritage, we did that back in, I think, October. And we recently had African American History Month. We had that the other day. It was a great turnout as well. And if you want to talk about that, and the piece we've done with that.
So, in order to continue to improve what we're providing for our students, we wanted to also tighten our partnership with our parents. Parents stated that they wanted to be more involved. They wanted communication to be better. They wanted to be a part of the school community. From the beginning, we've had meetings with parents, set up monthly meetings, coffee with the principal, conversations with the principal. We provide those meetings in the evening. Like I said, we're constantly making adjustments. When we look at the data, we weren't getting the turnout that we wanted in the evening, so then we started to provide them in the daytime. We saw a larger increase of parents coming in the daytime. It was stated to our parents that when they come into our building, that our parents do not feel like guests. We want those parents to feel like the place is theirs. We want them to be familiar with the security guards that greet them at the doors, our office staff that are in the main office. We wanted them to feel like this is a place where they belong. A lot of parents stated that they didn't have access before, and now that has changed. Our parents are a partner with us, so we have a wonderful PTG group who helps supports the school in any capacity. If we ask, they're there. We give parents access to be inside of the buildings. We constantly have meetings with parents to provide them with all the information that they need, and not just information, but support. We have a community that needs a lot of support, whether it's economical or social and emotional. We have a great PPS team who supports our students and our parents. I can't even say, the great impact that they have on the school community. They shine just as bright as the teachers and the administrators in our building because of the work that they do. But our parents feel that they are, welcomed and a part of the community. And, we continue to survey just to make sure that we are providing them with what is needed. With that, we also put incentives behind our school events to provide students with an experience that, they'll remember. As I stated when I got appointed a little over a year ago, middle school made the impact for me on where I was going to end up in life. It was my fondest experience. Middle school was where I got a chance to explore things that I probably wouldn't have, made friends for life. I still remember the educators that I had. That's the type of environment that we want to provide at South, and we have the staff that are committed to doing that as well. We have a staff that they really are generous with their time and their support. All of the events that happen at the school, I have little to no say in how those things are developed. That's how committed they are. They take control of it and they provide wonderful experiences for our students and families. They design wonderful environments that will look like we rented out banquet halls with no budget. And the students love it. We have pictures and slides up here to see, but that's the dedication that we have from the individuals in the building who want to change those burgundy indicators to green. And they're committed to it as well as us. And with the support that we continue to get from central office and our regional partnership group, we are definitely going to have South Middle School be a shining academic institution for the New Bergen Large School District. So with our steps, with our commitments, we're going to continue to hold professional development sessions with our teachers, continue to support teachers with walkthroughs, continue to invite them to do intervisitations, to support their peers, take away strategies and things that can improve their instruction in the classroom. We have a great relationship with the regional partnership group, and we're going to continue to have walkthroughs with them in our ICT classrooms. With one of the changes that we made is now we're doing those walks with our lead teachers. We have those detailed meetings with our English and math teachers where we have them break down and analyze data to see where we're gaining, but also where we need to continue to grow. Our second commitment with our FACE team, along with our PTG, we're continuing to hold parent workshops. We survey the parents to see what needs they want from what needs they have, and we try to provide them with those supports or information. That's through our surveys, through speaking with parents that drop off in the morning, or at the end of the day, or when they just pop in when they have questions, and we continue to hold talks with the principal, conversations with the principals. And lastly, we just continuing to increase the student events for the spring so that they have something to aim for that is tied behind their academic performance that will also support them and their families. That's the last slide, right? Thank you.
Good evening. Only roughly 1/3 of our nation's 4th and 8th graders can pass national tests, with students from low-income families and students of color fearing the worst. The majority of students who fail to master reading by 3rd grade either drop out or finish high school with dismal lifetime earning potentials. It truly becomes the school-to-prison pipeline. In 2021, Bonville School earmarked on professional development on the science of reading because we wanted to make sure we were using what the research says is the best way to teach children how to read. The science of reading is a body of reading research over the last 50 years from multiple fields that informs how proficient reading and writing develop, why some have difficulty, and how we can effectively assess and teach, and therefore improve student outcomes through prevention of and intervention for reading difficulties. It's not a philosophy, a program, an agenda, or one component of reading instruction. As part of our learning, through our school leadership team, our SEP, and our school, we looked at the differences between analytic and synthetic phonics as part of our work. According to the research, Hicks 1998, with analytic phonics, teaching phonics can take up to 3 years. Children can master 900 words by 3rd grade. It encourages guesswork and provides a recipe for failure. Synthetic phonics can be taught in a few months. Children can master up to 30,000 words by the end of the 3rd grade. It is well supported by research. It is effective for beginning readers, individuals with learning disabilities, low achievers, children from low socioeconomic status. It has long-lasting effects and is recommended by the U.S. National Reading Panel. For our youngest children, K-2, they must be taught using systematic, explicit synthetic phonics. We are trying to do this at Bonville during our intervention block, and we are seeing growth. Our beginning of the year iReady scores showed 22% of our students reading on or above grade level. Our recent middle of the year iReady test shows that 45% of our students are now on or above grade level. What we have found in the last 3 years, since 2021, is that our intervention block is not enough. We cannot intervene our way out of poor Tier 1 instruction. Tier 1 instruction, for those of you who don't know, is what students will receive daily during their 2-hour literacy block. In our district, what is mandated to be taught during this 2-hour time frame is the ARC program. I have written to our superintendent, Dr. Manning Campbell, and to the Board of Education May 24th and July 18th, and again on January 31st. I am asking
I'm sorry.
that Board of
Excuse
Ed
me.
policy.
I'm going to ask
I
if you
have a
have
few
a
more minutes to
presentation.
finish.
This is not an, I
I
need you to
am-
do your presentation, please.
I am asking that Board of Ed policy 1420 is followed. The program has many
Dr.
flaws,
Bond.
especially the fact that they use an analytic phonics approach with no rhyme or reason on how
Dr. Bond, do you
phonics
have a presentation
is taught
tonight?
systematically. We simply ask
Dr.
that-
Bond, do you have a presentation tonight? This is about
We-
the SCEP.
Oh, wait. We simply ask you to look at what is not working, because we cannot allow our children to continue to fail at reading. It's too important. Thank you.
Dr. Campbell, that concludes our presentations of the school comprehensive education plans.
Thanks. Do we want an opportunity to speak to South? Did you want an opportunity to speak to? Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Forget, Mr. Brown. Thank you, principals. Thank you for being here. Item 5.5, budget development update. Ms. Kimberly Roaring. And, and I'll be joining her.
Good evening. Tonight we're going to provide you with an update on our budget development process, as well as review the superintendent's priorities, our current revenue projection, have some discussion around revenue enhancements, as well as looking at our key expense drivers, our current expense projection. We are going to take a more detailed look at what our contract for excellence set aside within foundation aid is planned to cover next year, as well as our community schools set aside.
Thank you so much. So one of the things that we wanted to remind you that we were doing, we are reviewing our how we use our contract for excellence in community schools set aside funds and how they're going to be used for fiscal year 2025. We are also in the process of meeting with each building principal to really look at staffing ratios to ensure that we are scheduling approximately with our staffing needs. We're completing a review of all our retirement notifications to determine what positions we will need to maintain, with a focus on really supporting the best needs of our students. Later on in the presentation, we'll talk a little bit more about equity. Also looking at finalizing staffing ratios for faculty, support, and administrative positions. The priorities for this year, I think we've all heard it: literacy for all scholars, particularly looking at early literacy. We know that in the foundational years is when we really need to focus and hone in on supporting our younger scholars to ensure that they come in ready and prepared for learning. We need to enhance and continue our supports for our English language learners. Not only do they have the challenge of mastering the material, but we also have to ensure that they can also understand the material that is presented in front of them. That would bode the same for our exceptional learner population of students. We need to make sure that we are differentiating our instruction. Mr. Phoenix spoke a little bit about that today, using data to design our instructional approach and making sure that we're monitoring instruction. Ensuring equity in our budget, making sure that our building allocations are an amount per student based on building enrollment. No longer can we do a blanket, every single building gets the same allocation. We look at student needs and staffing needs. Looking at resources that are available for our English language learner students. Reviewing our in-district programs such as special education to make sure that our students have what they need. Data-driven staffing, especially in areas for additional support, such as academic intervention supports for staffing needs. Establishing staffing and student ratios by grade level and minimum course enrollments for electives at secondary level. Now, what does that necessarily mean? It means what we've noticed is that we're running programs, and we may not have a class filled with our students in that program, so to speak, but one of the ways that we're looking to ensure that we're offering greater programs is maybe in an after-school capacity to ensure that we're still offering those programs. So we're not doing away, but ensuring that we're maximizing and being fiscally responsible. Establishing staffing ratios for support staff and administration, looking at custodians, because what we've noticed is that some buildings, it does not matter the size, they may have the same size of staffing, and we can no longer continue to operate our district in that manner.
So we don't have much of a revenue difference between last week's presentation and this evening's presentation. We did share with the board last week that the 3-year fully funded foundation phase-in did conclude with fiscal 24. I can share with you that this evening the Times Union in Albany reported that both the Assembly and the Senate are looking at how they might be able to make some adjustments to the governor's state aid proposal, and they anticipate releasing their one House bills as early as next week, where we'll get a first look at what that might seem. We won't necessarily see detailed state aid runs to know what the impact for Newburgh is, but we'll get a sense at where they want to point that direction for aid across the state. As we shared last week, the significant portion of our revenue comes from state aid. So any adjustments in state aid formula or allocations do affect us significantly. Tonight, I've highlighted 2 areas in our line-by-line revenue because we want to really specifically talk about our contract for excellence set-aside and our community schools set-aside. We shared this chart with the board last week around restricted reserves and fund balance. The first column indicates the amounts of the current reserves, and then we looked at 3 years of potential use, followed by a total of what that would look like, and last numeric column reflecting what that remaining balance would be. You'll see here in this chart that we are proposing to spend approximately 50% of our one-time funds over 3 years. Again, our initial revenue projection shows that our state aid is 64%, which is almost double what our local revenue is, and those 2 combined sources really are the revenue of the district, with the other 2 areas comprising less than 2%. So last week there's some questions around how we might have revenue adjustments, and one of them obviously would be if the legislature were to propose additional state aid and in the reconciliation process that were to come to pass. The other 2 areas where the board would have an influence over our revenue is the tax levy, which we shared has been flat for 9 years, and then also through increased use of our appropriated reserves or unassigned fund balance, which are one-time funds that we would dedicate towards an operating budget. So we wanted to start the conversation with the board this evening and have some feedback on whether or not we should be looking at either of these avenues as we continue our budget development, so we can provide you with what some scenarios of that might look like. Well, are we going to get their feedback? Go ahead. Oh, you're here.
One more. So one of the things that we know that we shared last year, we talked about some of our biggest expense drivers: faculty, staff, and administrative salaries, employee benefits, including retirement system contributions, health insurance, etc. Yes, we know we did offer a retirement incentive, but that also comes with a cost to us. The cost does not go away. Student transportation and our out-of-district tuition for foster and exceptional learners, as well as some of our charter schools that we are responsible for transporting. We also have debt service, completed construction, and construction work, which is now underway. And we know that some of those costs have shifted in terms of inflation, as well as what the pandemic caused in terms of what we needed for construction. We also have some mandated expenses, tuition for BOCES out of district and some of our charter schools. We have an obligation as a district of residents to provide these fees. Special education program, we know that we need to provide services for some of our learners. English as a new language services, testing, our insurance and liability, our property, our student accident, some of our legal fees, custodian and maintenance of our buildings. We know we have older buildings and we need to ensure that we're maintaining our plans for our students and our staff. We have our transportation needs and our contractual salary increases for staff. Health insurance, etc., instructional materials, software, and things of that sort, as well as our annual budget vote and auditing services.
So when we looked at our initial budget projection, this too remains the same from last week. We have not made adjustments at this time. We have a total of $365.8 million. Of that, $278.5 million is attributed to our staff, including salaries and benefits associated with that. So looking at our restricted funds within foundation aid. So the state gives us a foundation aid amount, but then some school districts have required set-asides. So these are mandates that we're required to align with. And this year, 23-24, we saw a more than $4 million increase in our mandatory set-aside for Contract for Excellence. They have very specific ways that we're allowed to spend these funds, and we cannot supplant with these funds. We can only supplement with these funds. So in 23-24, we saw that increase. We've reached out to the state to see if there's going to be an increase for 24-25, as they had initially suggested last year. There might be. They are not able to provide that information to us at this time. We're hopeful we'll get it before the budget vote, as last year we learned about it after the board and community had voted on the budget and needed to make adjustments. These funds next year are going to continue to be in the areas of time on task, middle school and high school restructuring, full-day pre-K and kindergarten, and model programs for ELLs. This program started back in 2007-8, so a number of the items that we have in here have been continued over the years, with the exception of the adjustments that were made for the increase. So in terms of our model programs for English language learners, we're going to continue 23 teachers in that area with these dedicated funds. When we look at middle school and high school restructuring, for many years we've had that support 10 secondary assistant principals and 8 secondary guidance counselors. In 23-24, we added those 4 career and technical education positions at the middle school level, and we plan to keep those next year. When we look at our time on task, that supports 4 of our instructional technology facilitators, which are key in our buildings. 6 positions support our academic intervention services for our students, the director of technology, as well as 4 library media specialists that serve our schools. Full day K, pre-K for us is really a pre-K focus. We cover 5 pre-K teachers in these funds, as well as 21 pre-K teaching assistants, the transportation expense associated with that program, and all the supplies and materials associated with that program. Our second set aside for community schools is a much smaller number. It's $837,000. That amount has been constant. In 25, we plan to continue 2 school psychologists, 3 social workers, and 3 parent coordinators. The 3 parent coordinators were changed for 23-24. We want to continue that in 24-25. So when we look at our initial budget gap, this continues to be right around $16.5 million. As Dr. Campbell said, we're going through some reviews this week, and we hope to have some updates for you in March 19th, where you'll see that gap getting closer.
Thank you. So some of our next steps will complete our meetings with each building principal around scheduling to inform staffing. And I have to say that they've been working with us in terms of looking at the needs of the district and understanding that we have this hole, this $16 million hole that we need to fill. And so they've been coming to the table understanding that we're making not only academic decisions, but also fiscal decisions to ensure that we're meeting the needs of the district. We're reviewing the retirement notifications to determine which positions will be backfilled and where there may be some attrition. We're continuing to review revenue and monitor any legislative budget information. We're crossing our fingers. We're continuing to review expenses for efficiencies. We will provide an additional update to the Board of Education on March 19th with a focus on staffing. Any questions?
Mr. Bergerelli.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question on the ugly word taxes, tax increase. If we were to increase taxes, does that change how much money we get from the state? Is there any correlation?
There is no correlation between the tax levy and state aid.
Thank you.
And if we,
Oh, Mr. Harvey.
oh, I'm sorry. And if we do that tax levy to increase, and if the budget then get passed that the legislature promised us, what happens at that point?
So there's a couple of different things in play there, right? We know the New York State budget is supposed to be done by April 1st. This year, we are not asking the board to adopt the budget until the 4th week of April. So we do have some time between when they're expected to finish and when they may finish to really flesh out those revenue decisions as we finalize that proposed budget. We do expect to have a final proposal to you by April 9th. If they have not made those decisions by then and there are adjustments, we would make them in the April 23rd meeting. Ultimately, the board passes that budget. We would have to look at how we would be able to tweak that later on if that were to come into play, because I've not had that situation arise yet, so I will not go further with that.
Mr. Levinstein.
Thank you. So just a quick question. The $16 million shortfall that we're at now, does that include using that $6.4 million from reserves, or is that a suggestion that way we can go forward?
So that is inclusive of an increase in restricted reserves and appropriated fund balance to $6.4 million, which is $2.3 million more than we're using this year.
Thank you.
Board members, anybody else? Thank you.
If we could just kind of get a pulse on the board in terms of whether or not you want us to look at either of those other revenue enhancements while we're waiting for state aid, in terms of sim scenarios around what an increase in a tax levy might look like, and or what other proposals around additional restricted reserves or fund balance might be, so that you can consider that at a future meeting. If you could just kind of let us know if that's the direction you'd like us to look in, we're happy to provide some additional information on that.
To add to that a bit, some of the things we talked about was looking at the property values within the community and looking at what it would actually cost. We're hoping to be able to cost that out, or with some approximate, to see what the impact would be on households, dollars and cents.
So you both kind of took the words out of my mouth. I wanted to ask, but I was a little too timid to. What would a simple majority tax increase look like? Because I believe that the flat tax levy over the past, how many years?
9.
Has hurt us. That's really hurt us. It's nice to say and brag, oh, we've kept a flat tax levy, but now we're kind of in a bad situation. So what would a simple majority look like? What would a supermajority look like? And how would that impact our taxpayers? That would be very beneficial information, please, and thank you.
Thank you. And one of the things that we did last year, we showed what we left on the table. And if I can recall, I think we left about $24 million. Now, we understand the nation and where we are in terms of in a fiscal climate, but we do know that there are ramifications for some of those decisions that we've made. So we need to, really have a conversation about how we pivot moving forward and what it looks like for our community.
Mr. Howard.
Thank you. So would I be in line to ask going forward, maybe you can prepare for the next meeting, if we can look at what a 0.5, 1, and a 1.5 tax levy increase would look like per $100,000 households, just to give us an idea of what that would look like?
So we can do that. We would ultimately probably be presenting 4 scenarios, because I heard one of the other board members say they'd like to know what a simple majority would look like, and that's more than a 1.5% increase. I do that with the caveat of we do not have the current assessed values, so everything we're sharing with you is an approximation. Those are finalized in the usually June, July months, so that's when really we get the information to start setting the final tax rates. So we will absolutely do that. I just want to provide that caveat to you. It's going to be with current assessed values, not what's being changed in this year.
Okay.
Just Ms. Mineo.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Howard. I think I need more information before I can discuss anything with any good feelings about either one of those options. So thank you for giving us more information at the next meeting.
I would just like to comment and echo what Ms. Politi said. We've gone years and years without an increase to our tax levy, and I guess depending what side you want to be on, you could brag about it, or you could say it's really hurt us. And we're at the point that without committing to it, we need to seriously look at it. And I would like feedback from other board members this evening. Is that something that you believe that we should look at? Ms. Mineo?
I'd like to look more deeply at both of those options.
Okay. Mr. Grant?
I concur. Look more deeply.
Okay. Mr. Howard?
So when we say both options, which options are we referring to? Go ahead, I'm sorry. Which options are we?
I was referring to both the option to raise the tax rate.
Right.
And the other option was to, it's gone. Thank you, increase the use of the tax,
One time.
Go ahead, tell me it again. Restricted reserves.
So when we say we're referring to the 2%, correct? Are you talking about the entire 2% or a portion of the 2%?
So one of the things that I think we heard that we would look at using the one-time funds, as well as looking at what 0.5, 1%, 1.5, or 2% or super, right. So we would look at some different scenarios to see what the impact would be. And then, you can make a decision based on what we put in front of you, based on some approximation of what we saw last year in terms of assessed values of properties.
Okay, that's what I asked before, and then when you gave the answer, I thought you said that you didn't want to do that.
We're absolutely going to do that. My caveat is that that's using the prior year's assessed values, because we don't have that information yet. So when that's finalized, it usually has an adjustment in that rate. So we're giving you our best guess.
Okay, yes, that's what I asked, so yes.
Mr. Levinstein?
Well, to me, I would try to look first at what the reserve funds are, monies that we can use from there to offset the shortage. And I know in previous years, sometimes it's been fairly large where it can make a difference. And I would do that step first before I went to go to the next step of looking at either cutting options or raising taxes.
Thank you. Mr. Bergarelli, any comment on this?
Yeah, I have to concur with everybody else saying we need more information, but 9 years without raising anything, and nothing is cheaper than it was 9 years ago. So I think we have to, really seriously take a look at it, provide more information, take a look at it.
I agree. I think that we should look at both pieces and what I requested earlier, but also I think that, while we're looking at the ramifications of what a simple majority and a supermajority would look like, I'd also like to look at the ramifications of what it would look like if we're using more of those reserve funds as well, because there's always a con to that too.
Mr. Harvey.
Yes, I agree with Politi here on what we need to look at, because I also think, we understand that it's going to affect our constituents, but, we have to, close that gap because our kids is important.
Thank you. Mr. Walker.
I'm thinking about where I'm going to move. I would agree with Mr. Levinson here, but this is rough. Thank you.
Mr. Howard.
Yes, so, Ms. Rory, could you please, for the edification of some people here, or definitely we have people watching, can you talk about what the reserve fund is, how it's supposed to be used, and what goes into a reserve fund? Because I think that would give people some clarity on what we're talking about.
So this chart identifies the reserves the board currently has in place with funds available in them that are allowed to be used as revenue in an operating budget. These are one-time dollars, so when you use them, they are no longer available to you to use again. It's not like state aid that comes in every year or your tax levy that comes in every year. So we do need to measure how we use those funds to make sure we're not just pushing it down the road another year and then looking at another scenario like this. But these are able to be used for associated expenditures. For example, the first one there says workers' compensation reserve. That reserve can be used to the extent that we have actual workers' comp expenditures in the budget. So if the expense is $1 million, we could take up to $1 million out of the reserve as a revenue. Similarly, as you go down those, until you get down to the unassigned fund balance, your maximum use of any of those reserves in a given year is capped at what that actual expense would be in the budget.
Thank you.
Mr. Harvey, we're good? Okay. Board members, anyone else? Thank you very much. Okay, next, Board President. I have one item, one resolution for consideration, and one item for discussion. Could I get a motion and a second?
So moved.
On the resolution.
Second.
Discussion? Ms. Mineo.
I think the 4 goals that you've put forth are really good. They're very comprehensive, and I think they're doable. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. If you don't mind, because I know the community doesn't read every single thing. I'm going to read them. It's only going to take me a couple of minutes. We worked on this with board leadership, and we're putting this forward. Goal number 1, closing the achievement gap. The board aims to implement targeted strategies to narrow the achievement gap between students from different socioeconomic backgrounds, ensuring equitable access to high-quality education and wraparound support services, including mental health counseling and nutrition assistance for all learners in the district. Number 2, this is a very important one, enhancing community partnerships. I heard When the schools were presenting tonight, the schools that seem to be really doing outstanding work are the ones that keep on saying we have the parents engaged. And there has to be a direct correlation there. So enhancing community partnerships, the board seeks to strengthen and leverage the partnerships with families and community members that will provide resources, mentorship programs, and additional opportunities for student success both inside and outside the classroom. Number 3, promoting cultural competency and inclusion. The board is committed to promoting cultural competency among staff, developing inclusive curriculum, programs and policies which provide a welcoming environment that celebrates diversity and supports the unique needs of our diverse student population. Number 4, ensuring fiscal responsibility. That's our primary goal. The board will maintain sound fiscal stewardship of financial resources consistent with board policies through transparent operations, shared accountability, and best practice procedures. The budget will provide opportunities for academic resources, support, and services for students to promote the growth and development of educational and extracurricular programs. Any other discussion on this item? Call vote.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Doré?
Yes.
Mr. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein?
Yes.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Next up, an item that I've been interested in for some time now, property tax incentive for EMS and volunteer firefighters. This is a discussion item. Provided the discussion goes well, the next step would be a public hearing on this item. So I'm going to give you a couple of details for people that aren't familiar with this particular law. This is New York State Real Property Tax Law 466, also called the Volunteer Firefighter and Ambulance Worker Tax Exemption, and why it is so important to our school community and community at large. The purpose of the law is to provide an incentive for volunteer fire and ambulance services to assist with recruiting and retaining personnel. We live in the community. It's no secret that many of these volunteer services are often understaffed. At least 8 of our buildings are located within the service of a volunteer fire department. This means when an alarm is transmitted, the people responding will not be paid firefighters, but they will be equally as professional in terms of experience, competency, and required training. The same is true for EMS personnel. The people that staff these rigs are our friends, our family, and our neighbors. They are fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, and grandparents. They are the very best our community has to offer and willingly leave their homes at all hours of the day and in all weather conditions to assist neighbors in need. They ask for nothing in return for the incredible services they provide. But we have a chance tonight to recognize them in a small way. On December 9th, 2022, the Governor of New York signed legislation that creates an opt-in for local governments to provide up to a 10% property tax exemption to volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers. The law took effect immediately and can be implemented by local governments, including school districts. To be clear, this is a partial tax exemption, and it is not automatic. It requires a specific opt-in by the district, which is why I'm bringing it up this evening. Provided our discussion is positive, the item will then be placed on a meeting agenda in a public hearing. Here are some details of this exemption. The property must be owned by the volunteer firefighter or volunteer ambulance worker. The property must be the primary resident of the volunteer firefighter or volunteer ambulance worker. The property must be located within the jurisdiction served by the fire company or ambulance service to which the volunteer belongs. The district must certify that the volunteer is a member of the fire company, fire department, or ambulance service as applicable. Everyone doesn't get it. There are requirements that we need to discuss on and agree on as a board prior to moving this forward. We are allowed to authorize a tax exemption of up to 10% of the assessed value of the volunteer residence. I strongly encourage we agree to authorize the maximum 10%. That's what many of the school districts have done. The exemption is available only to members of incorporated volunteer fire companies or incorporated ambulance services who have been certified as being enrolled members for either a minimum of 2 years up to 5 years. I strongly encourage that we agree on the minimum amount of service term of 2 years. We can, as an option, grant members who have accrued more than 20 years of active service the exemption for the remainder of their life, as long as the member's primary residence is located within the district. I strongly encourage that we agree to offer the 20-year active service exemption. We can, as an option, extend the exemption to the unremarried spouse of an enrolled member killed in the line of duty who has been a member of the volunteer fire service or ambulance service for at least 5 years and was receiving the exemption prior to their death. I'd like to see this agreement on this item as we move forward. We can, at our discretion, allow the exemption to be continued or reinstated for the unremarried spouse of an enrolled member who accrued at least 20 years of active service and was receiving the exemption prior to their death. I'd like agreement on this before we move to a public hearing. If there are any questions, I'll try to answer them or defer to Mr. Shaw regarding the actual law. I talk about community a lot. This is very important and could help an awful lot of our community members. So I'm asking that we move this forward. Thank you. Mr. Howard.
Yes, so I think this is definitely something that we should have conversation around and consider. And as I like to tell people, you never really understand the importance or appreciate the work that volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance people do and they engage in until you actually need one, until you actually have a tragedy at home and you see how professional, how efficient in the job that they do. I do know that on March 13th, the Goodwill Firehouse will be doing a presentation on this item. So if anyone wants to go and find out more information, I would encourage you to go there. And I think this, as our president has stated so eloquently, this is definitely something that we should consider and have some serious conversation around because, like I said, you don't understand how important it is for us to acknowledge the work that they do. And like I said, the key word is volunteer. They volunteer to come out and save our life, our property. And I think this is a way for us to think about giving back and showing our appreciation for them. So I would encourage any members of the board, if you need more information, to go to the Goodwill Firehouse on March 13th. I believe it's at 7 p.m. And it will have a more informed discussion. So that's my take.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Mr. Shaw.
Mr. President, what you outlined is exactly every possible option under this law at the maximum level, which is consistent with what most municipalities are doing. So to have the public hearing, you should have a proposed resolution that would incorporate these elements. And the question for the board is, would they like the proposed resolution consistent with the elements that you described to be prepared for the discussion at the public hearing? So that would be a question. The other point that I'd like to make is that the taxable status date of March 1st is key to this. So with this conversation with the community, this could be set up not for the 24-25 tax levy, but starting with the 25-26 tax levy.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Mr. Levenstein.
So, Mr. President, I'm in favor of your interpretation of how we should go forward with maximum exemptions for the volunteer firemen and EMS within our district.
Thank you, Mr. Levenstein. Ms. Politi?
I too support this, and I want to thank Mr. Howard for pointing out the importance of volunteers in these situations, in these life-threatening situations that we don't always think about. So I would like to see a resolution in the near future. Thank you.
All right. So the question on the floor is, does anybody have an objection to moving this toward preparing a resolution? So that is what we'll do. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. McCoy, Clerk of the Board, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the approval of the minutes from the February 27th meeting.
Okay, get a motion and a second? On the
So
minutes?
moved.
Any discussion on this item? No. Call the vote.
Mr. Doré?
Yes.
Mr. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
I just want to let everybody know that the board packets, if you're interested in running for the board, are available. There is 6 seats open on the board, and the election for the board is the 3rd Tuesday in May. If you're interested in running, please contact me at the clerk's office. That concludes my items, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. Item 8, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources. Good evening, Mr. McLemore.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the Human Resources agenda, I have items 8.1 through 8.14 for your consideration on tonight.
Thank you. Would anybody like to separate out any of these items? Ms. Mineo?
I'd like to separate out 8.3, please.
8.3, okay. Could I get a motion and second on 8.1 to 8.14 minus 8.3?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion on these items? Mr. Levinstein.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, again, the Personnel Committee did not meet to vet the resolutions being brought forward tonight on the human resources. So for clarity for myself and others, I would like to ask administration if I have a correct interpretation of the resolutions coming up for a vote. We have regular appointments, leaves of absences, resignations, and rescissions. Negotiated supplemental memorandum of agreement for 2 nurses. Approve appointments or additional appointments from multiple funding sources for the following: substitute administrator appointments, 21st century after school appointments, elementary after school program appointments, South Middle School instructional leadership appointments, ELL Saturday K-8 program appointments, March Parent Connect appointments, New York Gear Up appointments, student parent workshop appointments, stipend for work previously performed by directors of social studies and science, rescind and approve a spring coaching appointment, create an assistant transportation coordinator, which replaces a transportation information specialist. Mr. McLemore, does this accurately describe the resolutions you are presenting?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on 8.1 to 8.14 minus 8.3? Please call the vote.
Mr. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Howard? Yes. Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Doré?
Yes. All right. 8.3, get a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on this item? Ms. Mineo.
I'd like to amend 8.3. In the second, be it reserved, be it further resolved, sorry. I'd like to remove the first name, Michael Reagan, under the advice of the superintendent.
Motion to amend? Motion to amend. Okay. Could I get a motion to amend the resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Levinstein?
So, Dr. Manning-Campbell, this is something you're putting forward? Okay. Thank you.
So we're taking a vote on motion to amend, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Roll call to amend. Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Howard? Yes. Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Doré?
Yes.
Mr. Grant?
Yes.
Okay. Now roll call as amended.
Mr. Howard? Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Doré?
Yes.
Mr. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mr. McLemore. Next, Assistant Superintendent of Finance. Good evening, Ms. Roaring.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance Division presents items 9.1 to 9.8 for routine consent tonight.
Thank you. Would anybody like to separate any of these items? Okay, get a motion and a second then.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on these items? Mr. Levinstein.
Thank you. I would just, as the corrective action plans, there's two of them here, are partially implemented, I would just like to ask that the board be kept abreast of the status of the district's corrective action plan that we're approving, and maybe quarterly report of are they finished or are they still in the middle of being done.
I think it might be a little bit more robust than that, but we can provide an update as we go to the audit committee. And then also, as we shared previously, there is a formal update issued in the next risk assessment, which is about to get underway. So you'll formally receive an update shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mineo?
Aren't some of these items, weren't they supposed to have been done a little bit earlier than now?
So not necessarily. The risk assessment was done previously. We had some plans for action, but those plans slowed as we waited to be able to present the reports to the board's audit committee. And we are still in line with our filing with the state timeline.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on these items? Appears not. Call the roll.
Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Doré?
Yes.
Mr. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Ms. Roaring. Item 10, Assistant Superintendent, CIO, DPO. Good evening, Ms. Peterson.
Good evening. I have items 10.1 to 10.4 on consent agenda for this evening.
Thank you. Would anybody like to separate out 10.1 to 10.4? Could I get a motion and a second then?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on these items? Call.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Doré?
Yes.
Mr. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Howard? Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items.
Thank you. Item 11. Good evening, Ms. Moriarty.
Good evening. Thank you. Elementary Curriculum and Instruction presents items 11.1 and 11.2 as consent agenda.
Anyone like to separate out these items? Any discussion on the items? Call the vote.
You need a motion.
Oh, I need a motion and a second. I'm sorry.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Call the vote.
Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Doré?
Dr. Mack?
Mr. Doré?
Yes.
Mr. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Howard? Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items.
Item number 12, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, Secondary, Dr. Mack.
Thank you, Mr. President. For secondary curriculum and instruction, I have items 12.1 and 12.2.
Thank you. Would anybody like to separate out these items? Get a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on these items? Call vote.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Doré? Mr. Doré?
Yes.
Mr. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Howard? Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you,
That
Dr.
concludes my items.
Number 13, Assistant Superintendent for Exceptional Learners. Mr. Forget will.
Filling in for Mr. Bear. So this evening, we have one item for your consideration, 13.1, recommendations from the CSE CPSC.
Can I get a motion and a second on this item?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on this item? Call vote.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Doré?
Yes.
Mr. Grant? Mr. Harvey? Mr. Howard? Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Mineo? Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
That concludes our items. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. No executive session. Okay. All right, last item, motion and a second to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. McCoy.
Mr. Doré?
Yes.
Mr. Grant? Mr. Harvey? Mr. Howard? Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Mineo? Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Walker? Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.